Hi, Eric.
How you
It
doing,
is
Trent?
time.
Good
It's
to meet
time
you.
for another workshop.
Thanks for inviting me on.
Absolutely, we love these things. Um, we were just we were actually just talking about how we love just getting together and talking about things,
Yeah,
and if it could be helpful to somebody to kind of jump into our conversation together, that's great.
sure.
That's why
Yeah,
we do
hope
these
somebody
things.
gets something out of it.
Absolutely. So let's start out with number one. The reason why we're here to talk today is to talk about the importance of being part of directories, like trade school directories. But the first thing I want you to do is introduce yourself, if you would.
Yeah, sure. So I'm co-founder of Peak Enrollment. We've been helping trade schools increase enrollment for a little over 3 years now. We work with small trade schools, large trade schools all over the country.
Mhm.
And we started out really just working with trade schools that were struggling with enrollment,
Mm.
and we helped generate more leads, and then we found that schools not only struggle with the leads, but then also struggle with actually engaging those leads and going through the admission process to actually enroll students. So we've
Mm.
been working on all those different levels for the past several years. And, we found that most trade schools um, have uh, struggle with enrolling enough students to fill classes. And one of those things is getting in front of people right when they're starting their research on schools. So,
Mm.
one of the most important things for a school is to get in and get on as many directories as possible. So, when people are out there searching for a school that matches their interests, there's more likelihood they'll find your school if you're on a directory.
Mm. That's true. That's true. And to give you a little bit of background too, when you founded Peak Enrollment with Chris, the name actually comes from you've climbed many mountains in your day,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
it's a step by step process, right? You just can't jump from the bottom to the top of
yeah.
the peak. So an enrollment is a good process. It's a nurturing step by step process. You can probably allude to that a little bit before we talk about directories themselves, about how
Yeah,
students find schools, if you could.
yeah. Sure. It's common for schools that are struggling with enrollment to have a website that basically you go to the website, you got to either call the school, email the school, or there's an apply now button, right? And that means a school is assuming that the very first time somebody comes to their website, they're going to call the school or they're going to start the enrollment process. That's just not natural human behavior. Um, it's with the analogy of a peak, that first day you start climbing the peak, it's a process. You're not going to reach the top of a very tall peak in one day. You're going to have to go through the process of slowly getting to the top. And with schools, it's no different. When the first day that somebody is thinking of going to a trade school, they start doing research online. And
Mm.
um, the really successful schools are the ones who understand that process and understand how to convert a first time website visitor into a student lead and have a system to nurture them through the process of researching schools, figuring out if a school is a good fit, figuring out financial options, figuring out scheduling, that kind of stuff. So,
To guide them through
um,
that,
you
right?
know, the first step is getting in on a directory, so you're getting more of those students that match your programs. But then the
Mhm.
second step is making sure you have a process and uh, optimally an automated process to to engage those new student leads throughout 2-3 month period
Mm.
that they typically take to go through the decision making process.
It's interesting. Actually, we'll kind of allude to this here in a little bit, but if um, could you explain from a standpoint of a trade school owner wanting to be a part of a school directory, what benefits would they find if they are part of a directory like that, or
Yeah,
many directories?
there's several benefits. One would be when students are just starting their research,
Hmm.
they typically are researching multiple schools at the same time.
Mm.
With trade schools, typically students are looking for a commute of less than an hour, so they're looking
Hmm.
at all their options within an hour drive. Um, and a directory uh, helps schools kind of get on the radar of potential students starting their search process.
Wow.
Um, Students these days are very good at online research,
Yes.
and actually, a lot of them do it on their phones. Um,
Yeah.
so making sure your school is on there will certainly help with increasing enrollment.
Mm.
Um, the other thing it does is directories do a pretty good job of helping students go through the process of figuring out what schools have programs that match the students' interests.
Ah.
And on the Peak National Trade School Directory, we have technology on there called Smart Match technology,
Hmm.
where uh, our directory helps match schools that have programs that match the student's interests. So the student puts in kind of the location. So they're looking for schools within at least within an hour commute, but that also have programs that match their interests. And once they submit that request, it goes out to the schools, and really, really important for schools to respond quickly to
Oh, yeah.
these new matches. Um, we see, we've worked with schools across the country, and when we start working with a school, um, one of the very first things we look at is how quickly they respond to new leads.
Hmm.
And interesting statistic: a school's chance of interacting and engaging a new lead goes down by 80% after 5 minutes.
Oh,
So
wow.
responding to a lead within the student lead within that first 5 minutes is critical.
Hmm.
So we also have a platform called Peak Suite that helps automate that process so that a school doesn't have to have people that can immediately respond to a lead within 5 minutes. The Peak Suite platform does that. It sounds cool and expensive, and it's really not expensive. It's less than $100 to get into, um, and it's a great platform to help schools respond to student matches and student leads very, very quickly, and they could literally respond to hundreds of new student matches at the same time simultaneously. So
Wow.
those are the most critical things in increasing enrollment.
You know what's funny is when you said the word match, it reminded me of like the dating sites that young people
Yeah.
are so
Yep.
used to. I'm just imagining because I never used a dating site because I've been married for 30 years. But when a young person, like my kids are, in their 20s and 30s, um, if they've been on a dating site, sometimes they're doing that late at night when if they were looking up a school's not working late at night at 2 o'clock in the morning or whatever.
Right.
So when they're matching things, especially from a school standpoint, they're searching when schools aren't open and can respond quickly. So having an
Yep.
automated system that does that for them is pretty cool. Um,
Yeah,
plus,
it's a
plus,
really
by the
good
way,
point.
the matching part of it is it's like a dating process. It's not all done at once. It's not just
Yeah.
making a phone call nowadays. That may be
Yeah,
something for you to talk about.
it's really interesting that you you bring up kind of that the dating site kind
Hmm.
of analogy because um, it fits really, really well. Uh, you know, 18 to 26-year-olds, they don't date like we used to date when we were that
Yeah.
age. We would meet one person and start dating one person or whatever. Young folks today, they go to an app where they can compare
Yeah.
and they go through the process way differently than we do. And they
Yeah.
communicate differently. They don't jump on a phone call. They don't
Yeah.
want to talk on the phone.
No.
They message back and forth to those
Hmm.
apps. Those apps have messaging features
Hmm.
so they can send messages back and forth. And they do that for quite a while before they ever even consider getting on a phone call or meeting for coffee or something like that. So it's
Yeah.
important to understand that engaging new student matches initially should be done the way the student lead wants to communicate, not
Ah.
necessarily the way we're used to communicating. We want
Hmm.
to pick up the phone and call them. Well,
Right.
we work with many schools across the country, and when we first talk with them, one of their main frustrations is, "Hey, when I call my student leads, they don't answer the phone, and they don't return my phone call." Well,
Right.
in this day and age, a lot of people, including 18 to 26-year-olds,
Uh-huh.
um, don't like to answer a call uh, from someone they know, let alone from a phone number they don't know.
Right.
Um, and
That's like our
then,
kids when we're trying to reach out to them.
yeah,
You got to text them
definitely.
first.
Yeah, I've told you this story before with my daughter. I'll be texting her, then I'll call her, and she doesn't
Uh,
answer the phone. I know she's there. I was just texting with her.
right.
But texting is one of the first ways that a school should be communicating with their new student leads to initially engage them through texting. Once the student gets to a certain point, then it's appropriate to get on a phone call or schedule a meeting, something like that. But texting is certainly one of the best ways to engage new student leads. And if you're in a directory, such as the Peak National Trade School Directory, and you're
Mhm.
matched with a potential student, then you can, through our smart matching technology, we also have smart flow technology that will send
Mhm.
that lead right into the Peak Suite platform, which will then start communicating with them through text messaging and other channels to start
Mhm.
engaging that new lead for the school and even schedule appointments with that new student lead and continue the process of nurturing them through a month, 2 month, 3 month process that it typically takes
Mhm.
for students to go through the research phases and the actual decision making process.
Mhm. Now, why would you say a trade school owner, why would it be important for them to be part of the directory, especially our national trade school directory? Why do you think the most important thing is for them?
Well, first and foremost, it just makes it easier for students to find them.
Hmm,
It's
that
it's a
makes sense.
free way to get in front of students that um, may have an interest in a career where the trade school offers a program that matches that interest.
Hmm.
So, uh, a no cost way of getting in front of more potential students.
Right.
A lot of trade schools struggle to fill classes,
Hmm.
and being on as many trade school directories as possible is one way to increase that enrollment. There are also some other side benefits.
Sure.
It does help with SEO. It's one
Mm.
other place where Google can find your school and do the indexing and help
Mhm.
your organic searches, stuff like that, which is important to be doing.
Yeah.
But the main reason is because it's natural human behavior for someone who is interested in going to school to start by researching. And
Yeah.
directories provide an easier way for students to find the schools that match, that have programs that match their interests.
You know what it reminds me of is how people nowadays, even myself, if I went to go buy a car, I do a ton of research, and this is my age, and especially younger people who do this already. It's their part of their behavior. Um, do a ton of research. I know how much the car is. I know how much I'm willing to pay for the car. I know what type of warranty. I know exactly the type of car and color that I want before I even walk into the dealer to talk with a salesperson who their original job was to convince you a particular car was the right one for you.
Right.
But really we know exactly what we want when we walk in now. So for a trade school, it's the same thing. So it's just that nurturing process of, is this the right school for me? In other words, is this the right dealership or salesperson that's going to guide me through the process? It's a similar type of thing.
Yeah, for sure. That looking at um, new students as someone that actually starts enrollment, looking at
Mm,
that person as, hey, this is a step that is far away from the very first step that they took when they started
right.
researching. There are many steps in between coming to the website for the first time and actually enrolling.
Mhm,
Most students have been to a school's website dozens and dozens of times
mhm.
before they actually pull the trigger. Well, how do
Yeah.
they get to that website dozens and dozens of times? If you don't have a system that nurtures them and brings them back to the website multiple times,
Right.
they could be going to another school's website multiple
Yeah.
times. You're
Mhm,
kind of leaving it up to them searching online and that kind of stuff.
yeah.
The hardest part is getting them to your website in the first place. Once they get
Mhm,
there, it's important to have that system to convert that new website visitor into a student lead and have a platform where you can actually nurture them through the process.
yeah.
Directories are a great way to bring those people to your website. Then
Mm,
having the process and the platform to help you nurture those is critical.
mhm. And that directory, you know, providing that step by step process to know what they are looking for in a trade school or a particular program, right?
Yeah, for sure.
In the
The
directory.
Peak Trade School directory, when the student submits their information and they get matched with a school, the
Mm-hmm.
school then gets the information about what the student is interested in, why they're interested in going to school, what their interests are, and a pretty good idea of when that student is looking to go to school. Very
Mm-hmm.
important information for when the school starts engaging that student lead, so that they know how to start that process.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm glad we had this conversation. Really, for I think it brings clarity to those who are curious about directories and the importance of directories.
Yeah,
And I want to reiterate that the purpose of our workshops really is to provide helpful information to school owners, knowing that we're trying to provide not only free resources but also other resources where we can help and guide schools along the way,
yeah,
because a lot of times schools really don't know how to implement these things. We can give them the tools and provide the tools at low cost to implement themselves, but quite often they're better at teaching, right?
yeah. They're not only better at teaching, even we work with a lot of like directors of admissions,
Yeah.
and school owners as well, and overall directors and different people throughout the trade schools organization.
Yeah.
And one of the things that is in common is that they think about this process from their perspective instead of
Right.
from the student's perspective. And
Yes.
we're able to help schools with people that are in admissions or whatever role that are our
Mhm.
age, that
Yeah.
think of things from the perspective of our age instead of from the perspective of 18 to 26-year-olds, which
Yeah.
the behavior is quite a bit different.
Hmm.
And the schools that are able to kind of make that shift and change the perspective to the perspective of the student are the schools that become successful the quickest.
Yeah, we see it all the time. It's actually really inspiring to us as we see that, because in closing, really the goal for schools and any school owner or administrator that's watching this, really our goal together is to help fill classes so that we can change more lives,
Yeah.
because it changes the trajectory of so many people's lives, if they can just find the right place for them, you know. So I'm glad we
Yeah.
do what we
It,
do for that purpose.
and one of the things that we were talking about earlier is typically the things that are good for the students end up being good for the school as well. So
Yeah, no doubt.
if we can kind of put ourselves in the shoes of the students and think how they think and figure out what is good for them, ultimately it's going to turn into higher enrollment and filling
Yeah,
classes.
definitely. Well, I appreciate your time,
Yeah,
Eric, again, and look forward to another call with you. And
good to be with you, Trent. Thanks for having me on.
yeah,
Appreciate it.
take care. I'll talk to you soon.
All right,
Bye, everyone.
thanks. Bye bye.